A family is at the table. The husband tells interesting stories from his work. His wife retells the last episode of her series, which she managed to watch while cooking dinner. The eldest son also has something to tell about his success on his new school project, as well as about the fact that he took second place at the latest sports competition, but next year he will definitely take first. The younger child is not yet very interested in the adult conversation, but he also madly wants to insert a few words. He shows his toy and talks about how today his robot transformed into a supercar and saved the bear from the attack of enemies. And the youngest daughter sits on her chair chewing a piece of apple and silently smiling, watching everyone talking. Have you imagined this picture? Surely this is what an ordinary evening of an ordinary family looks like. This is how most people imagine their ideal family. Everyone is sitting at the dinner table talking and sharing the news of their day and smiling at each other warmly. Surely many families live like this, but not the family that will be discussed today in this story. The strange story of this family has been going on for 20 long years. The strange part is that the man has been ignoring his wife for 20 years. He ignores her completely. He does not look in her direction. He does not talk to her, does not hug her after work, nothing, as if she is not even in his house. With all this, they continue living together, raising 3 children, leading their life together, eating the same meal, and sleeping in the same bed. The husband comes home from work, and she usually puts food on his plate, and he silently takes it and sits down at the table to have supper. He does not even thank her for the delicious dinner. Then he silently eats, gets up, and leaves. He takes a book and spends the whole evening reading or watching his favorite TV show or making something, but does not talk to his wife. They have 3 children. The man communicates with them. If he wants to convey something to his wife, he does it through their children. For example, if he needs to wash his clothes, then he asks the eldest daughter to convey this request to her mother. Or if on the weekend he needs their car, then he says to his son to take the keys from his mother and give them to him. They have lived in complete silence for 20 years. The poor woman has already lost count of how many times she tried to get her husband to talk. She begged him to tell her what she had done that caused such anger in her husband that he simply stopped noticing her. She tried to get him to talk through their children, told him about their achievements, but the man did not seem to hear her. She felt like a ghost in their own home. She did not understand how it was possible to deserve such an attitude. As a wife, she diligently performed all her duties. She raised the 3 children. She did not sleep at night when they had tummy pains and took them in her arms when they had a high temperature. She took them to all their activities and helped them with their studies. And then they grew up and became nice people. At home, too, there was always perfect order. She did regular cleaning, and there was always clean clothes. She ironed and neatly hung his shirts. Every evening, she washed his shoes and waxed them to a shine. Her husband silently accepted her care, and in return, he could not even nod in gratitude, not a single gesture showing that he sees and hears her. The first person who could not stand it was their son, who at that time was 18 years old. Throughout his life, he had never heard dialogue between his parents. The poor child, how hard it was for him to be constantly caught between his parents. They never went to the park together, did not come to his games together, and even going to the movies was done separately. You would not wish such a childhood to anyone. He was very upset because of the behavior of his father. Many times he cried on his lap so that his father would take pity and speak to his mother, but his father was relentless. He talked about how much he loved his son, but the boy should not get involved in his own relationship with this woman because these were adult matters, and when he grew up, he would understand. Time passed. The boy grew up without knowing a happy family or love between his parents. Yes, they lived together. He saw and talked with both parents every day, but didn't know anything about their common pastime or if they ever traveled together. Once, when his mother once again tried to make her husband talk and her attempt was unsuccessful, she silently wiped away her tears and went to another room, and their son jumped up and abruptly ran out of the house. He could no longer stand his mother's deep sorrow. He could not influence his father in any way, and this upset him even more. But on that day, he firmly decided by any means to find out the reason for his father's silent behavior at all costs and to try to solve the problem. He must reconcile them. He explained his request to journalists in the hope that their experience in communicating with people would help his family find a way out of the situation. He went to the local television office and told them all the details about his family. The employees of the TV channel were very interested in this story, and the very next day they stood on the doorstep of their house collecting cameras and preparing for an interview. The owner of the house opened the door and was genuinely surprised to see people with microphones and television cameras on the doorstep. They went into the house and started a dialogue with the man. Of course, he denied it as much as he could, saying that this was only his and his wife's problem and did not concern other people at all. Then the journalists asked the man to tell the story of their acquaintance. The man could not start for a long time, but finally he dryly said that they had met in a local park on a bench near a fountain, and then he escorted them out of his house. This seemed like a failure, you would think so for sure, but in fact, the journalists had one plan which they hastened to implement. They sent the husband and wife secretly away from each other in an invitation to a personal interview and made an appointment for both of them at the same hour on the same bench in the park near the fountain, hoping that their old feelings of youth would spark with new colors and the man would finally talk to his wife. On the appointed day, the man came to the park and saw his wife on the bench. She was sitting alone on their bench and looked at her feet. At that moment, his tears rolled down his cheek. He looked at her for the first time after all those years. God, how old she'd become during this time. Her eyes were dim from constant tears and despair. She was sitting there so thin and infinitely lonely that the man's heart ached. He went up to his wife and hugged her tightly, and then they cried for a long time, and then he finally revealed his terrible secret which he had kept for 20 years. It turned out that after the birth of her third child, the woman completely went into the role of mother. She spent all her free time on the children and did not pay any attention to him. When he came home from work, he wanted to tell her his news and share his impressions of his day, but his wife was so absorbed in caring for the children that she simply did not notice him. And then he decided to show his wife how insulting and painful it is when you are not noticed and stopped all communication with her. And then he simply couldn't stop, and this kind of revenge lasted for 20 long years. The poor woman, all these years, she did not know what to think. She went through dozens of possible options in her head, but she simply could not even think of this. This is how the usual jealousy, the husband's jealousy of his wife's concern for his own children, turned the existence of the family into a real hell for 20 years. He asked for her forgiveness. After all these years, he begged her to forgive him. He admitted that he wanted to discuss so much with her that now even eternity would not be enough to tell her about everything he had been silent about for all those years. And then they sat in the park for a very long time and talked and could not stop talking. Do you think the man is right that he ignored his wife for so many years? Be sure to leave your opinion in the comments.